Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 138, the podcast where we discuss photography, videography, and anything and everything that's got anything to do with any of that. With me, Kirsten Lutz, and in today's episode, we have, of course, just as always, another awesome guest. But before I announce who it is, I have a favor to ask. When I checked out analytics, it turns out that 70% of you listening or watching on YouTube have not subscribed to this channel. And whilst that's absolutely awesome that you're listening and watching anyhow, if you like this channel or like this video, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. I'd really love to get that down to like 50% or something. So click like, hit subscribe, and leave a comment. It'll really help our channel being found. So buckle up, grab a cold one, and let's shake it up right after this. Before we get started, let me just say a quick thank you to our sponsor, DVE Store. DVE Store's mission is to help you create better video and provide you with the tools necessary to explore your creativity. If you have any digital video equipment needs, whether that's camera equipment, audio gear, or lighting, and much more, you can check them out at dvestore.com. Thanks to DVE Store for the high-def video. So in today's episode, we have another special guest. Give it up for the California-based portrait and therapeutic boudoir photographer, educator, and YouTuber, Mike Lloyd. Mike, man, how's it going?
So good. Thanks for having me on, Kirsten.
Awesome, man. It's really interesting. I'm really great you got in touch. I'm great. Anyway, I'm really happy that you got in touch with me because boudoir photography is not something that we've had on the show before, and it's always been it's been one of these niches of photography that I've always been thinking, well, we should really get a boudoir photographer on. And then seeing your work, which is totally amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm really, really happy to have you on the show and to get an opportunity to talk to you. Now, I think the first thing that people wonder when they think of boudoir photography usually is, what's the difference between boudoir and glamour and art nude photography, for example?
Yeah. I think the titles are for SEO purposes, really. It's really your intention with the photography and what end result you're offering for your client. So like you read there in my title, therapeutic boudoir photography. I had zero intention of doing that when I got started because I just didn't know that could even be a thing, but it's how I've positioned myself in my area to differentiate me from other photographers. I mean, aside from my work is significantly different from how other people shoot boudoir normally, the intention behind it. And I say on my website, it's not about taking sexy photos. I photograph women being strong, confident, elegant, feminine, and that kind of energy looks sexy when you're radiating that kind of confidence. But sexy photos is not the point of what I do. And as far as therapeutic goes, and we can unpack this over the next 2 hours, I'm sure we will. Again, because it's not about the photos. I even tell my clients during our consults, like, your photos are the souvenir from the experience. And that's really where the magic happens. If you walk out of here without buying any photos, you're still going to have, it's still going to be worth every penny. And my clients have told me that. Thankfully, they buy photos. But yeah, for me, it's not about the sexy photos. I want the confidence, the transformation. I want to change the way that my clients see themselves. And it's turned into more of a therapy session than a photo shoot, in my clients' words. And so I've adopted that as my own brand position.
That's a really interesting thing. I mean, therapeutic boudoir photography is clearly very different from just boudoir photography.
Yeah.
But so what does it do to your clients' confidence and self-esteem?
Man, part of my process, let's jump back to my consult. I'm asking them to visualize, and I'm not telling them the mechanics of what we're doing, but I want to know who it is they want to see in these photos. And I don't say, tell me about yourself, because they're thinking of the iteration of themselves that they don't want to see right now. They're going to tell me the things they don't like about themselves, the reasons they're not qualified to be in front of a camera 90% of the time. Instead, I said, describe the woman that you want to see in these photos. And I'll use their name, but I'll say, tell me, what is she like? Describe her as a person, her personality, and what makes her special. And then they get so excited talking about who this person is that they want to see in the photos. And that begins this whole process. And then things that they love about themselves, both physically and emotionally. And then we unpack different quirks and different things that make them special and unique. Because everyone says, oh, I'm not special, I'm boring. And I'm like, well, cool. What do you do when you're off the clock? You know, like when you go on vacation, do you read? Like what? And I get to know them on a more granular level. And that's what we incorporate into the shoot. And they realize like, oh, I guess not everyone does this. Or maybe this thing that I do isn't trending on Instagram right now, but it's still a cool thing. And I, you know, shouldn't be ashamed of liking to knit, or the fact that I, you know, have a matcha machine that I use every morning instead of making coffee, just little things like that. So when they come into the shoot, they're already visualizing this unique, special, worthy person. And then they do these awkward poses. They look ridiculously good in the camera. And then it just like this switch flips. And it's the same. It's like 5 to 10 minutes into every shoot. And then suddenly they went from like hands shaking, nervous to, oh, I got this. Let's do this. And it's such a cool thing to see over and over again, even after 7, 8, this is my 8th year of doing boudoir full time.
It's really interesting, you know, what you're saying there about this warm-up phase at the beginning of the shoot, because you know, and I've spoken about this many times on this podcast. It's a very similar thing when it comes to headshots, for example. You know, especially when you have headshot clients that come in and they haven't really had their headshots done before, or they feel nervous about the way they look, or they're not really exuberating with self-confidence or something. It really takes that, you know, that little time at the beginning to get them to calm down, chill out, and start feeling confident. So how do you get them to that point? Do you show them some of the images to start with, or?
Yeah, firstly, when they walk in, we lay all their wardrobe out, and everyone's just pacing around nervous. It's great. And then I let them pick the music. We pour a glass of Prosecco or some bubbly water if they want, and then we do hair and makeup. And I sit there face to face with them while we do an hour and a half of hair and makeup, and we're just talking. I don't even have the camera in the room, and they're in, you know, sweatpants and a baggy t-shirt or something, and we're just hanging out. And by the end of that 90 minutes, it's like we've created such a comfortable environment. You know, I'm very particular about who I allow into my studio to work with me, and my makeup artist. We worked together. This is our 9th year, and we just got such a good rapport, and we're so good at making people feel comfortable in that space. We've already had the build up. Now we have this transition period. So when it comes time for them to actually, you know, put on whatever the first outfit is, and pull the camera out, we've already done so much of the work. And then it's just a matter of, cool, put your elbow there, chin over this way, eyes down, take a breath, do the thing. How great do you look now? I show on the camera and they're like, holy smokes, where did that come from? I'm like, it's been here the whole time. So
I was wondering whether you shoot tethered, whether they can see themselves on a screen, or you just go on the back of the camera.
Yeah, because I don't want them to be focusing on that, because then you get a lot of eyes looking over toward the screen in photos. I'm like, no, I want you here, or I'll tell them where to put their eyeballs. But no, I only want to show them certain ones. And because my lighting style and the way that I edit my images, there's such a transition from straight out of camera to the finished result. I don't want them seeing the unfinished product unless it's one that I can look at and be like, yeah, this one's fine. So I also curate that. So
do you send them like an online gallery after the shoot, and they pick their final shots?
They come back 2 weeks later for in person.
All right. Okay.
Yep. And everything's edited by then. So they're seeing fully edited images on a big screen with all the products around them.
Oh, okay. So you edit the whole lot, and then they
my
take
editor
whatever.
does.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. And she's way better at editing than me. I always did same day reveals before, where my client would go take a 90-minute break. I would call and edit usually 75 photos, at least get them like 90% edited. I'm not in there doing all the really small fine tuning, but most of the way through, and then I would finish editing the ones that they picked out. But now I block my schedule, so I have multiple shoots in a day, then multiple reveals in a day, and my editor handles everything in between.
Awesome. Well, so in today's episode, we're going to talk about boudoir photography secrets. So for anybody who ever thought they might be interested in boudoir photography and really don't have the first clue as to how to do it, this might be a really interesting episode. But before we get into the essence of the technical part and how to actually do it, I just wondered, how did you get into boudoir photography? What was your path? Because for some reason, and this might just be me, but for some reason, I always had the impression that this would be, like a female-dominated part of the industry, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I'd say, 90% of all boudoir photographers are female, and I'm just making up a number. But just, looking on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you go, an overwhelming majority are female or female identifying. I think it's just not enough dudes have stepped up or realized that they could. And when I got started, I was doing nothing but families, kids, and engagements back in 2010. I didn't want to touch boudoir because I didn't want to be the creepy dude at the camera. Like, I never thought that I was that guy. Most of my friends have always been women. Women have always been safe around me. But I had a lot of friends who were models who had horror stories about dudes just being weird when they get out to the shoots. And I didn't want to be associated with that person. Like, I knew that wasn't me, but I never wanted to even, I didn't want to tell people I was a boudoir photographer and have them think that I was the creepy dude with the camera on Craigslist trying to do, free shoots in his basement. So I just avoided it. And I photographed a ton of Cirque du Soleil performers, dancers, cabaret show performers, all different kinds of performers in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm here in California, and I was doing all the posters, the billboards, all the marketing, advertising stuff. And I got contacted one day by a professional dominatrix, and she'd asked if I would take marketing photos for her because she liked what I had done for these other cabaret shows. And I'm like, well, I've never really done anything like that before. I've done branding stuff and I've done the dancers, but not anything like that. And she's like, well, I love your work and I like the stuff that you've produced. I'm like, well, I mean, if you're cool with me giving it a shot, having never done this before, I'm willing to give it a go. So we went and we did this shoot, and I'm thinking, like, how do I photograph a dominatrix in a way that also satisfies me creatively? Because I don't just want to take sexy photos. Like, to me, that does nothing for the artist in me. And we told the story of her basically getting ready to meet a client and then coming home from meeting with a client. And so it's her getting dressed, lacing the corset, putting the makeup on in the mirror, looking out the window, things like that. And then coming home, just the look on her face as she walks back in the door, as she's undressing, getting ready for bed. And we just told that story through photos, and it ended up kind of being a hit. A bunch of her friends wanted to book me for sessions after that. I never had to, we didn't shoot any nudity. There was nothing sexual about the images, but I mean, that was the product essentially. And I had a blast with it. And so then other people started reaching out to see if I would do similar shoots for them. And in 2015, I shut down my old business, opened up a new legal entity, and dove all into boudoir. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a ton of people who wanted to work with me, and it allowed me to build a portfolio and kind of create things as I went. And you can see on my vision board over my shoulder, like fashion inspired photos. I shoot everyone like it's a Chanel ad. I never learned how to do traditional boudoir. So I shoot it the way I want to shoot it. And I pay attention to what my clients want. And I've just, I guess, naively grown my business that way.
And if they keep coming back, then you're doing the right thing, Or I guess if they, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is your marketing model predominantly based around word of mouth?
No, paid ads.
Paid ads, okay.
Yep, I do have systems in place for referrals, and I do a lot of vendor marketing, teaming up with other businesses, stuff like that. But now paid traffic is my jam. SEO, though, as of this morning, checking my analytics before this, I have passed in organic traffic what my ads have done. I guess I don't really run traffic to my website from the ads, but my SEO is finally catching up. So
amazing.
Diversifying. Amazing.
Yeah, I think the SEO side of things is what I need to work on. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's really intimidating for a lot of people to get started on, but you learn a couple of fundamentals and it's not difficult. It's just, there's such a slow turnaround time from when you do the work to when you see the results. And so you don't know if what you did actually worked for a few months. And then you can go back and review. And I think that's the difficult thing about it. Do you feel the same or why have you not dove in like you wanted to?
I think it's, it's partially, that's a very good question. I think, generally SEO is quite a confusing subject.
Okay.
To me in particular, I think I'm not the most sort of technical person, I think is probably fair to say.
Sure.
So as far as like, computers are concerned or technology is concerned, I'm like an end user, right?
Yep.
Like, I come at it from a creative point of view for the most part. If you think like, photography, if you take photography in general, do you think of it as a spectrum, from the super technical to the super creative, and then every photographer is going to sit somewhere on that spectrum. Some people are very technical, some people are very creative and don't really know the first thing about anything to do with the technology of it, but they just,
sure.
Intuitively do what they need to do or know what they need to do. And I think, I would guess I'm probably sort of somewhere off the center of that, wearing towards the creative side of things.
Okay.
So like SEO is probably that one step of the deep dive too far for my brain.
Okay.
Generally speaking.
Valid.
Have
you considered outsourcing?
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm considering. Yeah, for sure. Because that's that's another thing. Of course, I think anybody has to learn is that if you can't do it yourself, there's going to be somebody who can, and it's just it's worthwhile. Look at that way. For me, it's always been a matter of volume that's led to outsourcing. A good example. Editing is actually a really good example. I do. I think I edit probably 90% of my headshots myself, except for volume shoots. So, if I'm at a conference, for example, in particular, like pre-COVID, for example, I used to do a lot of conferences. And so, you shoot 100, 200, 300 headshots at that conference. Like, I'm not going to be sitting there hand retouching all of those.
No, your brain is melting out of your eyeballs by the 50th one. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, the time investment, it's never going to pay. That's the thing. So it's, in that respect, it's much easier. And of course, now, I used to outsource it to like a retouching house, but nowadays with AI, it's even cheaper and even quicker.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes in relatively handy. So, and I think, generally what I do is it's moving, more into that direction.
Yeah.
But, predominantly, I think, with my headshot business, it's predominantly referrals, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for the most part.
Yeah.
So, and I did try and use paid advertising as like Google Ads one time and miserably failed.
Yeah.
that was my experience with Google Ads. So,
I haven't had the best of luck with Google Ads either. I just haven't put the work in. And part of that is the Google ad gets people onto your website, and then you need a really solid conversion strategy to get people to then get on your email list, to book a consult, to book a session. And it's just one piece of the puzzle. Same with SEO, I recently just did a year's worth of blog content for my website in like a day using AI stuff. But boudoir secret number one, if we're going to number these, and you can totally do this for your headshot stuff too with SEO. The function of SEO is not to like trick Google into showing you first. It's a way to allow Google to understand what your website is about and connect you with people who are searching for those terms. So if you open up an incognito window in your browser, that's what Chrome calls it. I don't know what the other ones call it. And just go into Google and type in headshot photographer, your city, or boudoir photographer near me, something like that. It's going to give you a list of suggestions. When you scroll to the bottom, it's going to give you a list of other searches that are relevant to what you're doing. Or it'll have it's a list of like drop-down questions with the little snippets of answers. Those are the most common things that people search for on Google related to what you do. Or you just type in, headshot photographer and let it autofill, or boudoir, let it autofill. Those are the titles of your pages and your blog posts, because those are the most important things that people are searching for. And then you're like, cool, I typed in the word boudoir photographer, and it gives you suggestions below, like, what do you wear at a boudoir session? How much does boudoir photography cost? Whatever. Those all become blog posts. And then you don't even have to worry about like typing a compelling blog post. I use voice dictation on my computer, and I'll just sit back in my chair and talk out what I think I want to say. And then I'll go back and I'll do one edit, and I'm usually good. And it doesn't have to be, a dissertation that you're submitting for review. It just has to be helpful information without fluff. And so Google will tell you what to call your pages. Those are your H1 tags. That's about as technical as we need to get. And then just talk to your computer like you're talking to your client. So it sounds like your voice, and it doesn't seem like a, technical manual for, I don't know, something that nobody actually wants to read. And then just schedule one of those every couple of weeks. And before long, Google's going to think you are the best resource available for serving these kind of clients, because you are. You're providing useful content with words that clients are actually using. And at the bottom of every blog post, you're like, oh, cool, you want to know about what to wear for a boudoir shoot? Have you thought about shoes? Check out this post on what kind of shoes to wear. And then at the bottom of that one, you're like, oh, cool, now that you know what kind of shoes to wear, have you thought about, accessories and jewelry? And then you'd link into another one of your blog posts. And now you've had somebody clicking on multiple blog posts. Google loves that, because they're not just going to one page and bouncing. They're visiting multiple pages on your site. Google tracks all other behavior. And now you're showing up even higher in search results. So I was going to be moving across the country 2 years ago, and I started creating content for the new city that I was in. And within 30 days, I was ranked number 2 for about every boudoir phrase in this new city I wasn't even living in yet, because no one else did this. So if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, don't do this strategy, but anywhere else, go ahead and give it a shot. Because it works.
Because you're not too far from Cupertino, I guess. Is that right? You're
10 minutes north of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Apple spaceship.
Yeah, I know the area a little bit, but I've been to San Francisco a couple of times, and the Bay Area. So
yep.
So I can kind of picture where you're at. So you know, if you are in that area, then make sure you check Mike's studio out. In actual fact, here's a little listener shout out. If you are in the wider Bay Area, somewhere in California, and you're listening to this podcast, make sure you get in touch. It's always awesome for us to hear, or to get to know people and see where they are when they're listening to the show. That'd be super interesting. So if you are somewhere in California, hit us up, get in touch. You can do that via Facebook, join our Facebook group, or hit us up on Instagram, or send us a pigeon if you must. Any which way. This is where we interrupt our regularly scheduled programming for a new segment that we call What is Dave Up To Now?, where we follow Dave Williams and his latest adventures due north.
Hello, Camera Shake Podcast. Hello, Kirsten. Hello, everybody. I am in a cabin. This is a Rawbu. It's a fisherman's cabin. This one's been restored on the island of Svinøya, just outside of Svolvær. Let's go outside and I'll show you exactly what they look like. So, excuse the wind, it's crazy windy. This is my cabin, and you can see some more cabins down below in this beautiful setting. Let's just duck out of the wind a bit. This beautiful setting here, the sun has gone. It is, let's have a look, 2:40. The sun's gone, some cloud is moving in, but this place is absolutely stunning. These cabins are 200 years old. There were 12 fishermen per cabin 200 years ago. And some of them have been restored, but there's one over there which has been left exactly as it was, which is going to be in my YouTube video this coming episode 9 of Due North 2. I'm waiting patiently for the clouds to disappear again. I'm hoping for some polar stratospheric clouds, which are extremely high and extremely cold. They're basically made of ice crystals, and the most stunning colours appear when the sun is below the horizon, illuminating the clouds as the light goes up above the horizon. But I don't know if that's going to happen today. Anyway, the rest of this adventure is looking epic. I would love you to carry on following along while I hide from the wind. Northern Norway is stunning. Winter is just done differently here. They do winter properly. They learn all about the snow and the ice and the cold from a very young age, and they just do everything very differently, and I love how that works, and I'm having a great time shooting everything that I see. I'm going to be done here at Svinøya in a couple of days. I'm doing some work here, shooting the cabins and shooting the northern lights for the owner in return for a stay here. I don't know what to say about this place though. It's just, if you ever get the chance, once in a lifetime, as often as you can. That's what I'm trying to say.
When it comes to boudoir photography,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, when I was thinking about it, and I was looking at your pictures, or at your images, the thing that really struck me was your lighting. Like, you likened it to a Chanel advert earlier, and I completely agree. I mean, your images are lit so well. What's your sort of go-to secret when it comes to lighting boudoir?
So when I did that very first session, back in, I guess that was 2014, I did the session. I showed up at her house to do the shoot, and the room we had to work in was basically an empty room, hardwood floors and white walls. The bed had white sheets. There was a mirror on the wall, nothing else. And I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do in here? I don't have anything to interact with. There's no like cool set. And she's all in black in a white room. And I don't know, it didn't fit her brand to have like brightly lit images. So I threw a gridded strip box on, and I just side lit her for everything to basically take the background out of it. I mean, it was lit enough that it didn't look like she was in a black room because the white walls were reflecting light everywhere, but I really controlled the spill and just lit her like that. And that's kind of what I had to do, but it worked. And that is kind of where I got my style. And everyone liked the way that those images looked. And so I did a couple more just portfolio building shoots to figure out, the nuances of that kind of lighting. And it separates me from everyone else around because no one shoots like I do. And I really enjoy the challenge because in a bright sunlit room, when there's no bad angles for light, to me, that doesn't challenge me. And I want to go into every shoot, with a new body type, a new personality, a new everything. And I get to put all the puzzle pieces together. And this lighting style is a challenge for me too.
You know what I love about your lighting style is you work really well with short lighting, and I just love the way that it creates mystique and mystery because your shadow work, if I want to call it that, is so good.
Thank you.
It's really, you always feel like there's something left to reveal, which is great.
Yeah. After I started doing it, that became part of the brand. And I encourage my clients, wear whatever you want. If you don't want to do shots in your undies, great. Go fully clothed, they're still going to be sexy, because exactly that. We're not just putting everything out there, and if that's what you want to shoot, great. It's not my style. I'd rather leave more to the imagination, and it's the bits that you're not getting that keep you in. So thank you for acknowledging that also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely the thing that really jumped out at me when I looked at your imagery. It's really it's very interesting. And it really made me think about just generally about the style of boudoir photography and it's sort of the reasoning behind it, if you know what I mean. Because, it's often the things that we don't see that intrigue us much more than the things that are blatantly obvious.
Right.
And I really feel it really works really well with that style of photography. Because, as you say, because you have subjects of different body types, for example. And I guess that's really something that, must boost your client's confidence as well when they really see themselves lit in this way and not everything is totally revealed and out on show. That's great.
Correct. Yeah. Now, given side lighting shows every pore, every wrinkle, every crease, everything, which is why I don't show as many images off back of the camera and why they don't see unedited images. So there is that. But again, I've got an amazing editor who does it way better than I did for my first several years of doing it. And so that's not an issue anymore. But you have to know what the end result is going to be if you're going to shoot this style, because straight out of camera is not the same as, it's not just color grading. There's a lot more that goes into working the images.
Yeah, that's I know this very well from portrait photography, because that's that's a large part of what I do, and it's very similar with with a project that I shoot called 3 Heads in a Row, which is sort of a slightly comical, slightly cartoonish form of portraiture. But if when you look at the straight out of camera image, it leaves a lot to the imagination, and it's very different from the finished shot because the post-production is actually part of the style, so you really only get 50% of what you're actually going to end up seeing in the final shot when you look at the thing, the image straight out of camera. And so at that point, and the way I shoot it is actually, I have my clients or my subjects review them on a screen. They come through on a screen straight away. They see the image straight away. In this particular context, it's important because I need to adjust their expression. It's all about the expression in this thing, and it's all about making the expression as extreme as possible. Right. And so it serves two purposes. For one, I can direct them much better if they see themselves, and secondly, it helps me getting them to relax, because after about 10 minutes of doing that, even the most extreme, ridiculous expression starts to become pretty normal because you've already looked at 30 of them.
Right. Yeah, you're like desensitized to the ridiculousess. Yeah,
completely.
That's great.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's the whole point. Exactly. Yeah, desensitized. That's the word. So, but in a sense, it's similar in the sense that what they see on the screen is nothing like what the finished product is going to look like. Yep. They have a good idea as to what it's going to look like because they've seen a lot of my other work, so they know where this is leading to, in a sense.
Yep. Do you do behind the scenes photos and share what that process looks like?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I've written about it on several blogs, for example. In fact, I did an episode of Behind the Shot where I was going through all the behind the scenes malarkey of that particular project. Yeah. It's one of those things that it's one of these projects I do it for, really, as we say in Britain, for shits and giggles. As they say, it's really just, it's a good laugh. It makes me laugh because I find those images funny, and and my clients find them funny too. So, it's just a good time. The end result is hilarious. And that's really all it is. It's just like, I don't know, you can call it an art project if you want, whatever. Yeah. It's just a fun thing to do.
Yep. Which is super important. And a lot of photographers, especially when you get into the grind of doing client shoots over and over and over again, you have to do the fun ones that keep you excited as a creative so that it doesn't just feel like a monotonous, like a cookie cutter process. So,
yeah.
You know
what's interesting about this also is I really enjoy teaching that process. And I know you do a similar thing on your YouTube channel, for example, where you go behind the scenes when it comes to like a boudoir photography, and you sort of, share the techniques and the secrets, as it were. And I've noticed, you seem to really be enjoying your YouTube videos.
I have a blast, yeah. And that was part of the thing when I was working with the creative team to start the channel. It's like, I want this to be me. And I like just, uncensored, if you will. Like I'm going to give you everything I got. I'm not going to pretend to be something because I know I'm already a character. Let's just do this. And I just have fun with it. And that keeps me going too. Behind the scenes is another boudoir secret, because we need to demystify the process for our clients, because they think our website is just models, and the person viewing could never do the things that the models are doing on the website, when in reality, the clients on the website thought the same thing, and now they're the ones on the website, and it's a cycle. So, I do behind the scenes where we're shown in a brightly lit room doing the poses, and then it pans it cuts to the finished photo, and it's like, oh, that's how you do it? You're not in like a dark room. And that has really helped elevate my brand and make it feel more accessible to more people. So I know we don't want to like show all the magic that we do, but at this point, show everything. Like you could do videos of you retouching to show what level of retouching you do based on clients' comfort, but the behind the scenes of the shoots, get model releases signed, will really make everything seem more accessible, because it's such a vulnerable experience. So when they can see that everyone's just laughing, having a good time, there's no awkwardness at all, and then this weird looking thing turns into this beautiful photo, people are going to want to work with you.
That's a really good point, actually. And I've always loved behind the scenes. Just generally, we've done quite a bit on the Camera Shake channel, but one of the reasons I love it is because I love watching behind the scenes thing. I've loved watching behind the scenes stuff ever since the advent of DVDs. Do you remember back in the day when you get a DVD of a movie and then it come with a second DVD that had all the behind the scenes stuff on it, and
the bloopers and outtakes and stuff.
Yes, and how it was shot, and all that kind of stuff. And I used to buy like a DVD set, and I'd watch the behind the scenes first before I watched the movie.
Okay.
Because I was completely obsessed with seeing how the process worked, and also, things you watch the movie and, let's say there's a lot of CGI in it, and you kind of go, well, that's all well and good. I want to know how they made this. Like, because I know that dragon isn't real. Isn't it? Like, or is it? Yeah, exactly. So, but, it's, and that's sort of the interesting thing, and when you really deep dive into it, you realize, well, they're not even wearing like superhero costumes. They're just wearing blue suits with ping pong balls stitched to them. That's nuts. Like how,
Yeah.
So I've always been super fascinated with that. But I think, in today's world of social media and all the rest of it, behind the scenes footage really serves one very crucial purpose, and that is people or potential clients will get a really first-rate impression of what it's like to be working with that particular photographer. Like, that's the kind of vibe that goes on during the shoot, and they can see, well, this looks like fun. I mean, I want to be in that situation,
Absolutely. It adds a human element to it. It makes it relatable. It makes it approachable. And no one wants perfect on Instagram anymore because it's not relatable. They want to know that we're just regular people doing a thing, and they could do it too. So,
and also, nobody believes perfect anymore. I think I think humans in general have wised up to the fact that things aren't what they seem. On the internet. So,
absolutely, and I think it takes a lot of pressure off us as well. Because we don't have to do this high production, behind the scenes documentary style shoot. We're not shooting Chef's Table. We can do everything with our smartphones, which have great video capabilities considering that's what I do all my stuff with. My makeup artist, who's there anyway, she takes behind the scenes footage with my phone. Or I went and bought this little Canon PowerShot. Is it about? I don't even know. It doesn't matter. Just a little point and shoot camera that my stylist can use on auto mode just to document what we're doing. And it's like photos of me demoing a pose in front of my client, or just us cracking up over something ridiculous that we're talking about. And that stuff is magic. Zero production quality, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's the really fun part with it. You know, when Instagram first introduced stories, and this goes back how many years? Like 5 years, 6 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, you know, the way it was intended to be used was, you know, was this idea that, you know, you take a series of shots throughout the day and you basically tell the story of your day through a number of different shots that you string together, and each shot pops up for 10 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And you basically sort of document or like story tell your day that way to your friends and followers and whatnot. And, you know, at the time, and I mean, I wasn't the only one, but at the time I thought like, oh, this is a really cool concept. It's vertical video. What if I made a story every week and I completely way over the top overproduced it? Like, what if I throw everything in the kitchen sink at it and I script it, you know, I work out the storyline, I script it, then I shoot it, and then I totally over the top edit the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And then I put it out every Wednesday or whatever. And then 24 hours later, it just disappears and it goes. And I thought it'd be a fun thing to do, you know, just to see what the response would be. And the response was massive. It was ridiculous. Like literally, I kind of thought, at first I thought, okay, well, you know, if I hit 100 followers, then, you know, then that's me done. And that happened within the first day or so.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, wow, okay. And then I kept doing it and I thought like, oh, well, when I hit 300, that'll be, you know, I'll pack it in then, because it was quite a lot of effort. That happened really quickly, and then I had 500 really quickly, and I had like, when I hit 1,000, I kind of thought, okay, I need to get my weekends back.
Right.
You know, that's like, but it was a really interesting, it was an interesting experiment. And what people particularly seemed to like was when every now and again I put a blooper reel out, where I basically made a story out of all of the things that went wrong behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And those were some of the most successful videos at the time, you know, is people could actually see what it was like, because by the time, you know, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks in, this was like a family production. Like I think my daughter was like 6 at the time. She was totally involved, and she actually sometimes she became the director, the camera person.
Yeah.
She would call the shots. You know, my wife was involved, like my kids were involved. It sort of turned into this family production, you know, and it sort of, yeah, it was a little bit overwhelming at one point. So we kind of thought, okay, experiment went well, perfect, let's move on.
Like if only that could have been the full-time gig and you don't do anything else, then you just saw the family time. But yeah. Right. And that's one way to do it. I think it's cool, right? To do the creative projects, as we touched on earlier, just play and see what works.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
All right. So
posing?
Let's come back to posing. And what I'll do is I'll just cut to this bit, and then we'll use, you know, the other bit at the end of the behind the scenes bit, if you know what I mean.
Cool.
And then we'll just cut I'll just cut straight into posing now. Okay. So the other thing that I think people are often wondering when they think about boudoir photography is posing. How do you pose your subject? First of all, my impression is this is about 1.5 million different poses. So how am I going to remember all those? And secondly, is that how do you connect with your subject, who's not a professional model, and get them to pose for you? Like, what's your secret when it comes to posing?
So even when I work with professional models, I do all the directing. You know, I've got a friend who has been in Vogue. She's done a ton of different fashion modeling. And when we did my posing book, we went through and I shot her doing 150 different poses. with like how I actually put people into the poses. And we had a blast doing that. But it's all up here, right? So I'm giving her the direction how to do everything. So whether they have experience or not, I go into every shoot with the same intention. And that's the first big step. You need intention with the posing. It's not a matter of, well, what's a good pose? I don't know. Well, a good pose for what? For this body type, for the kind of mood and feel that we're trying to create? Because if I'm going to go with a really fashion-inspired shoot, that's going to be very different than if I want to do something more like soft and playful. Do I want more submissive poses? Do I want more dominant poses? Am I showing off legs? Am I showing off arms? Am I just like, what are we doing? So understanding that is the first step. What are you trying to accomplish? And it's not just making people look skinny. That's not it. Obviously, we don't want to make people look put them into an unflattering position, but that means something different for absolutely everyone. I have just as many clients who are size 0 who are like, can you please give me curves? Because I don't have curves. I'm like, I got you. So it goes both ways. And I just start with one position. Like I'll have them sit down and it's like, cool, move that foot, move that knee, do the thing. It's triangles, it's separation. I mean, there's so much that goes into that, but it's having intention first and then just moving one body part at a time. And when I got started, we didn't have Instagram yet. Pinterest, I think, was just a thing, but I would literally get fashion magazines and tear out pages, and I would look at the page of the magazine and be like, okay, turn that way a little bit and then move your elbow out and just moving one thing at a time on people, copying a fashion magazine pose. And that's another reason my photography looks so much or looks so different from other boudoir photographers, is because I never learned boudoir posing. Everything that I shoot is fashion. And so that was just literally copying fashion magazines. And then also understanding like, okay, well, this is a professional model. Everything is heavily edited. I'm looking at back of camera on someone who has no idea what they're doing. How do I bring the two together? But having intention, just focus on one body part at a time and make triangles and separation. So like everything, we don't want right angles, bring it into a triangle, with the hair, bring things up over here. We're creating triangles. We don't want things squished, get some separation. I could ramble on for a while. Stop me, please.
But posing is a really interesting subject, and I find this like even when it comes to headshots, for example. Posing is very important because again, it's all about the direction, because your subjects don't know the first thing about posing, and they literally just go look at the camera and go, okay, and it looks like a passport photo basically.
Right.
That's the thing. So without direction, you're never really going to get a result that's sort of universally pleasing, as it were, or interesting, or especially with headshots, brings across, for instance, the client's profession, which I think is, for me, is always extremely important. Like I'd shoot somebody, somebody who's a nurse, for example. I shoot him completely different from somebody who is the CEO of a company, or something like that. So really, all of that is in the way that they hold themselves, in the way that they're posed, in the way that they look, and so forth. A lot of that really comes directly from that.
Yeah.
So you talked about different body types. So how important is posing when it comes to different body types?
Again, it goes back to intention. And that's why I don't believe in like plus size poses, or because every body is different. I mean, like as in 2 words, every body is different levels of flexibility, mobility. Clients may have injuries, not be able to move certain joints certain ways. Even just the way that they shift their weight and their core strength, how they can hold themselves up or balance. When they kneel, can they sit back on their heels? Not everybody can. And so I can't do the same poses with everybody. Or sometimes I have someone who's 6'3", I put her on my couch and it looks like she's on a piece of children's furniture. And then I have someone who's 5 foot and it looks like, she's Alice who ate the other mushroom that shrunk her down. And
like in one of these giant chairs.
exactly. And so there's, and to me, this is the fun part. I never want to see a photo of a client before they walk in. You know, my styling team can work with any hair type, color, texture, any skin type, condition, anything. And then I can pose anybody. And it's just because, I mean, I've done this a million times, but even when I got started, and I think this is another tip number 3, when you're directing people, even if you have no idea what you're doing, give confident sounding direction, and tell them they look great. So when you start, you're like, okay, turn your shoulders that way, bring your chin over here, and then look at the camera, and then pop your booty back, and then bring your hands up into your hair. Even if it looks like the most ridiculous thing, be like, yes, that looks so good. Now drop your other hand over here, take a photo. Now drop that hand down here, take a photo, tell them they look great. You can review the stuff later on. You're just portfolio building at this point, and just constantly move things. Every time you take a photo, tell them to move something, turn something, drop something, lift something, hook it in the waistband, bring it up, whatever. Remind them that they're looking amazing, and just keep moving things, because when you're moving them quickly, they don't have time to think about how awkward all of this feels. So you'll get better facial expressions. Also, you're not sitting there thinking, oh man, that doesn't look good. What am I supposed to be doing? And then the client or model or whoever sees your face, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm ugly. I can't do this. They're disgusted by what I'm doing. Meanwhile, you're not even considering them. You're thinking about how you're the failure, and you're both sitting there in the room having a panic attack on entirely different levels, and it's totally unnecessary. So just go in and just move things as fast as you can. Don't think about what's even going on, and just review everything later.
And also, I think one of the really important things you mentioned earlier is just move one thing at a time. And I say this to my clients all the time. This is like the mantra. Just move one thing at a time. You know, especially, I find this, it's super important and super effective when you're shooting groups of people as well, by the way. So, you know, when I do band shoots, for example, and especially with younger, more inexperienced bands that don't really know, that's the first photo shoot they've ever done. They really don't know the first thing about posing or how to stand or any of those things. And then, you know, placing them in place and then telling them to just move one thing at a time works really well, because you can either give them a specific direction at the beginning, or once they get used to it, you know, once we're like 20 minutes into the shoot or something, they start to get a hang of all of the different things that they could move. Like they could move a hand or an arm or the head or, you know, whatever. And before you know it, you get to this point, this is what I feel, you know, I get to this point where they see the flash going off, and they know, they're trained. They know to move one thing. And it literally just then, you know, it's just a conveyor belt at that point. And then I just have to throw in some very specific directions if I see something that I like, you know, or I've got a specific idea. But usually at that point, then it starts to roll pretty easily.
Absolutely. And when giving direction, use your outside voice. This is a thing I teach, you know, posing classes, lighting classes, and the new photographers will step up and they're like, well, if you could, I don't know, if you want to like turn your shoulder, or maybe if you want to look over there, like, no, turn your shoulder, chin over, eyes on that, and never use the words left and right, because our left and right is backwards from our client. So I have concrete things around the room. I don't mean they're made of concrete, but that light switch is a fixed position. That doorknob is a fixed position. And so I know that when I'm having clients pose in front of my backdrops, that corner is 45 degrees away. That light switch is 45 degrees away. The camera, and I can tell people, look into my light, look at the light switch, look at the whatever, and they know where to go, as opposed to, cool, now look left. And they're like, your left or my left, or, you know, that's a huge...
Yeah, absolutely right. That confuses the hell out of me. Like, my brain isn't wired to see things in mirror fashion. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, I just can't, my brain just doesn't work like that. So I need to use alternative terms. You know, like, for instance, I would use, instead of, right or left foot, I would say camera foot, and that'd be the foot that's closer to the camera, basically, or something like that. That usually works. The way I place, the way I pose it usually works. Do the same thing. I basically make them point out to you, look at that shelf, or, turn your head into the light, or whatever it may be.
Exactly.
That's a really great tip. I mean, that works perfectly. It's left and right. It's too confusing anyway.
Right?
before we know it. This whole thing, like, about, I can never remember what starboard and whatever the other one is.
And port.
I have no idea what's what. Zero. You can explain that to me 50 times over and I still won't remember what's what. So,
no.
Yeah, my directional brain isn't really happening. My wife will attest to that because I always get lost. All right, cool. So, if you had to give somebody, like, your top posing tip, like the top number one posing tip, what would it be?
Create triangles. Everything should form a triangle. The legs, the torso, the way they're positioned in the frame, arms, hands, everything makes triangles. I'm going to give a quick apology to the folks in podcast land. You can't see this photo, but we'll link to the book in the show notes. So if you check out this page, you can see I've drawn triangles on her.
Fantastic.
That's what we're creating. That is where my brain goes. I'm not looking at the person as a person when I'm posing. I'm like looking through them and I'm seeing them as shapes. And that's how I pose somebody. It's not an arm. That's just a line over here that I need to put into an aesthetically pleasing way.
And if somebody's interested in getting hold of your posing book, where can they find it?
BOUDOIRguild.com, and you'll see everything available right there.
Excellent. And of course, we put all the links in the description. Anyhow, so if you were to check out Mike's website, or where you can get hold of the book, just check out the description. Whilst you're doing it, by the way, let me just say, whilst you're checking out the description and you come across a subscribe and like button and so on, just hit that. Just it's easy. Just hit it.
You know what? That'd be my number 2 best posing tip. I think you will instantly become a better photographer if you just subscribe to this channel.
Oh, absolutely.
I've heard that science backs that.
100%. 100%. But if you are listening to the audio version only of this podcast, you might hear my dog traipsing around in the background. He's managed to break into the room.
So, like, whether or not somebody picks up the book, I will say, if you're using a resource with you as a guide, which when you're portfolio building is amazing. I mean, I even keep my own book in the studio for my own reference, because I get into routines. I go through the same stuff with my clients. I have my poses that I know work well for just about everybody, the ones that everyone buys, which is important because I'm running a business. And then, I don't know, maybe 20% of my shoot, I'm experimenting and doing new things with everybody. And so I keep the book with me because there's a lot of poses I shot for this book specifically that I don't normally do. And so it keeps me being creative. But even if you're just having magazines or something with you, I always recommend a paper version of whatever your resource is versus a tablet or a phone. Because when I'm looking at a magazine or my book, and which is why I specifically did the spiral bound version in addition to the PDF, I'm not losing that connection with my client. If I'm scrolling through a tablet or something, we're on different planets. And that, to me, is not acceptable. So another reason I switched to mirrorless cameras, because of how good the autofocus is without me having to hold my face up to the viewfinder, move my focus point. The camera can just do that automatically, and I shoot everything at f1.8 and I can trust the technology. I never have to lose eye contact with my client. I can hold the camera up, frame it, and then look at them while we're doing whatever we're doing, and I can take the photo and trust the tool to get the job done. So that's another big one, is maintaining that connection.
That's huge. I think eye detection is a huge improvement, generally as far as communication is concerned, because otherwise you always have this thing between you and and the subject.
Yep.
And of course, it's in portrait photography generally, whether it's headshots or whatever. Whenever you photograph another human, it really pays off to not have that thing blocking your face, because that's that's how we connect. It's like through the eyes and through looking at somebody's face. So fully agree. Even in video, I mean, ever since I switched to the Z6 II that's filming me right now, I don't have to even worry about focus, at all. I just turn the thing on, it catches my eye. I can see on my little screen, it's just following my eye around as if it's nothing. It's such a time saver, and also just a hassle saver.
Right? Basically. Well, and you shooting headshots, I mean, connection is the photo. When we don't have any other body parts visible, like, it's about the connection. And I'm sure you noticed before, right? When you could get a great interaction with somebody. The second you bring the camera up, people change. And all that work you just did went away.
Yeah, and it's actually very similar to what you mentioned earlier, which is when people look at a phone. When you're having a conversation with somebody and they start looking at their phone, you immediately feel like, okay, they've checked out. They're not listening to me anymore. They don't, they're not interested. They're not interested in what I have to say. And it's like, to me, there's like, I immediately think it's rude. It's like, I immediately have this thing like, oh, okay, well, pardon, what am I doing here? You clearly don't want to communicate with me. And it's really a very similar thing when, as a photographer, when you sort of disappear behind the camera. And like I said, I've found this, it's made a massive difference to the way that I shoot headshots, by just being able to not having to disappear behind the camera all the time. I also like shooting headshots with a tripod for that very reason, because I can literally just have that conversation. The only downside of that is that what I find is that I have to remind people to look at the lens, right? When it comes to headshots, it's because they tend to very much instinctively look at where my face is, which might be slightly off center or whatever. So to get the eye line right, that's one thing, but that's no big deal, really, right? In the great scheme of things.
So I did the same thing when I first switched over to mirrorless, because my verbiage was always, look into the light, look at the thing, or look at me. And when I switched to mirrorless in my first session, I noticed my client's eyes were up in all of the photos. I'm like, that's weird. I remember her looking at the camera, but she wasn't. She was looking at me, not the camera, which was lower than my eye level. And so then I had to change my verbiage that I had used for 6 years of photographing people. No longer like eyes on me or look at me. It's look at the camera, eyes on the camera. So I did have to make that adjustment also.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about post-production and editing. And I know you mentioned earlier that that's something you outsource for the most part.
I do now, yeah.
But I'm guessing when you first started, you did all the editing yourself.
I did. And I mean, like, we've all had instances of, hair tie on somebody's wrist or lint on a shirt that you're like, man, I wish I would have caught that, because now I got to clone it out of every single photo from the shoot. What I loved about the editing process is that it made me a better photographer, because I learned what I needed to fix in the shoot to save me that time in post-production. Also, the minimum viable product, which is what is the least amount of work that I need to put into images that I could sell to my client. And not because I'm lazy, but because, like when you were doing your Instagram video projects, like, you want to have your weekends back and hang out with your family and your friends and like sleep. So I needed to work on that as well. And I would work backwards into the shoot, like, okay, I'm editing these things out of the background of all the photos. So I'm going to take the extra 2 minutes to clear out the back of the room, knowing that, it's going to slow down the pace of the shoot, but the client doesn't care if it takes 30 more seconds. Just keep talking to them while you're moving things around, and then your life gets so much easier. Having professional hair and makeup that's, again, non-negotiable. As a male boudoir photographer also, I always have a female stylist present. It's never me alone with the client. because if their bra strap is twisted, I'm not going to go adjust that. My stylist will. Stray hair on the face that I don't have to clone out now. My stylist spots things like that. We've built up that kind of rapport together. So we're both looking for those kind of details that she can jump in and fix too. So for me, it's really how much can I prevent before I get into post-production so I can speed up the workflow. And I've got my skin retouching. I've got my color grading for the style that I shoot, which is why in 90 minutes, I could call and edit 75 to 100 images almost to the point of being ready to print. Yeah.
I think, the other thing to consider is, of course, that ultimately, as far as the post-production is concerned, you're still running a business. So if you're spending twice the time on editing a single shot, you're literally losing that time the other end. So I always think, if I can fix something before I start shooting, then that's going to save me so many hours afterwards, which I can then use to, I don't know, do some marketing or, do another shoot or whatever else.
Yeah.
Or just watch Netflix.
Take a day off and go do something, have lunch with your daughter, right?
Exactly right. So I think, something that really struck me with your images as well is just how well the skin retouching is, or how good it is in your shots. Do you use a particular technique for that?
I run everything through Imagenomics Portraiture first, and that does a lot of the heavy lifting, and then frequency separation to smooth out all of the shadow highlight transitions. And I can get each photo done in it takes about 40 minutes to run portraiture on a batch of 100 photos. And then, I can go grab a snack or do something else while that runs. And then, I don't know, 60 to 120 seconds, I guess 1 to 2 minutes per photo of actual frequency separation work. And, I run the action to do all the frequency separation stuff, use a Wacom tablet, and I can go through and fix something real fast. But
actions in Photoshop are also key for that. I do the same thing, as far as skin retouching is concerned.
Yep. And then presets in Lightroom, whether I'm using gels or just my standard white lighting, I can batch that to the whole shoot. And I know that 95% of them are going to be done right there. And I might just adjust shadows or highlights a little bit, one photo at a time. But frequency separation is a game changer. To try to clone out all the things, it took too long, honestly. And with frequency separation, it's fast and it looks so much better.
And it works equally well on skin as it does on fabric. That's the other thing.
Everything. Wrinkles in fabric can go away too. All of
exactly.
it. Is that what you do also?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. 100%. Yeah. On fabric, especially on shirts.
Yeah.
And on the background as well. It works really well on products, just generally just to even out shadows and stuff like that. Or reflections, sometimes when you have specks of something and something, it just works really, really well.
Yeah. And content aware fill. That has been another huge game changer.
Yeah.
It's oh man, there's tags showing through the lacy underwear. How I'm not going to go in and try and clone the piece of white out through all the little lace. Now we cut tags off of everything when my clients walk in the door. But it could be a spot on the floor. It could be anything, and content aware fill can get rid of almost everything.
Another thing that I love doing, especially in portrait shoots, is I'll overlay a texture over the backdrop, in post. And what that does is it actually saves me a lot of time. First of all, it looks really cool, but also, and of course, you've got a degree of control over what you want it to look like. But it also gets you out of the fix of having to retouch the background to that degree, because the texture just hides a lot of the imperfections, and actually they sort of blend into the texture, and it makes it look even cooler. And you don't really have to go in. A good example is I use a black pop-up backdrop a lot.
Sure.
And that thing is always freaking fuzzy. There's always some there's always crap on there, like you can't help it. I mean, I have a dog, so there's going to be a dog hair on there, which you don't see when you put it up. But then, of course, once you review the images on the computer, you go, oh, damn dog. And then that hair is going to be on every flipping shot, that's the thing.
Yep.
So, yeah, I work with textures quite a lot. It does work really well, especially in the 3 Ads in a Row series. The background is really a composite out of a number of different textures and the black backdrop. And really the only thing I have to clone out is where you can see the corners. Sometimes there'd be a bit of a light stand or a bit of a clamp coming in or something like that, So that kind of stuff I'll clone out, which takes no time at all, especially with content where I film. Most of it is just literally just, you highlight it.
Yeah.
Click 2 buttons and it's gone, for the most part.
Why don't you outsource all of your editing? Why just the volume shoots?
It's probably predominantly because I really quite like editing. I like, it's part of, it's a part of my creative persona.
Okay.
A lot of the time I shoot for the edit. So I know exactly what the edit, because I know what the edit is going to be like. I know exactly what I need to get in camera. So, the way I always explain it is, it's a little bit like, for those people who play the electric guitar, right? An electric guitar in itself, without an amplifier, is pretty much a dead instrument. It's not very loud at all. You can barely hear it. It doesn't sound very good. It doesn't sound like what you would imagine an electric guitar to sound like. But an amplifier on its own is just a dead box. It's inanimate. It doesn't make a sound. But once you put the two together, you can create awesome music. And in fact, you have to put the two together because otherwise there'd be no music. So it really only works when you have both. And so I approach post-production and the actual shooting part in the same way. To me, it's a little bit like an electric guitar and an amplifier. To me, that is the whole thing. So when I do specific shoots, like let's say 3 Ads in a Row is a good example, or band shoots, stuff like that. I sort of backwards engineer the whole thing, so I know exactly what the whole thing is going to end up looking, and then I backwards engineer it, so I know exactly what I need in the shooting part. I also work a lot with composites, so that's the other thing. So I composite things, and I saw one of your shots, which had lots of like books hovering around.
Yeah,
so I do. That's the kind of stuff I do. A lot, and so there, because I already know what the final product is supposed to look like, I shoot for the post-production process. And so I really enjoy it. That's probably the main reason. It's where I don't enjoy it is when I do an event shoot, for example, or a volume headshot type of thing, where I know I'm going to have to get through 300 shots, or I could deliver 250, 300, 400 shots. I don't enjoy that kind of editing. So that's the sort of thing I'd outsource.
Yeah. So when you do your headshot sessions or portrait sessions, how many images are you working on from a given shoot?
So what I do is the selection process actually happens right after the actual shooting session. So the client will basically review them on the screen here in my studio, and they will pick the shots that they want to go into retouching. Yeah. And so because my pricing model is based on a session fee plus a per photo fee. So the more shots they essentially pick, the more I upsell, if you want to call it that, right? Yeah. And so depending on how much time I've got with them and how many looks I can create in that time, that'll basically have an impact on how many shots I'll retouch afterwards. Okay. So I'm never really going to retouch that many, you know? So, we're talking anywhere between 3 and 7.
Yeah, that same. When I do headshots, I don't send those to my editor because by the time I've uploaded them and sent her the editing instructions, I could have just done that myself also.
Exactly. That's exactly
right. So with Boudoir, and the reason I encourage all of my client or all my photographer students, everyone to outsource is because we're showing more than the 3 to 7, 3 to 7. Yeah, just do it yourself. Not a big deal. But too many photographers, I feel, hold on to that process of doing the edits because it's part of our creative process, right? But when you have 50, 70, 100 images for a session, it's not the best use of our time. And like you mentioned earlier, we're running businesses. We don't make money when we're editing. We make money when we're shooting and when we're selling.
Yeah.
So
you're absolutely right. I always say, I make money when I'm shooting. I'm losing money when I'm editing. That's the reality of it. And so, so that's exactly why, I'll edit the sort of smaller operations myself, and the large volume stuff goes. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I've predominantly used sort of external editors to do that, actual humans. Yeah. But now, of course, with the way that AI has developed over the last 6 months or something, which has been nuts. Yeah. There's some really viable AI solutions out there. And I know from a lot of my wedding photography friends, a lot of them have entirely switched to AI editing with amazing results.
Right. It's like half a cent per image, and it does all the color grading. It'll straighten your horizons.
Oh, absolutely.
And clean everything up.
Yeah, it'll learn your editing style. I mean, it's just the thing that, blew my mind. Is like you feed a few thousand of your own edits into the thing. It'll work out what it is that you do and how you edit stuff and what your look is, and then it'll just recreate that. That's nuts. And of course, it's only the tip of the iceberg because, if anybody who's interested in AI, whether that's out of sheer fear, or out of interest, a couple of episodes ago, I interviewed Mike Lloyd, who's an AI expert, and that was really, that completely blew my mind. I mean, that's because I remember we did an episode about DALL-E in August, I believe, when DALL-E was big in the press, and it was like the thing that could turn text prompts into like photorealistic images and all that.
Right.
And then when I spoke to Micah just before Christmas, it's like, that's an old hat. I mean, that's ancient history. Now we're 3 months on from that.
Right.
We're talking about exponential development here. Yeah. So yeah. And, what that can do, again, from a purely from a business point of view, what that can do in, economizing our time is brilliant. That's really where the future is when it comes to post-production.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do the things that creatively fulfill you, but everything else, just let the machine do it.
Right. And this is one of the biggest differentiators. It's what I start my trainings with. Every new photographer I take on, we differentiate business owner who takes pictures from a photographer who's trying to make money. They are entirely different people, and we need to be business owners who happen to run a photography studio. We are no longer photographers who are trying to make money because now everything is focused on the business. And the number one job of a business is to make money. And
to have an income to basically, pay your rent and everything else, your mortgage or whatever it is. I often have these sort of conversations with amateur photographers, who in a sense have the luxury of spending all of their disposable income on the latest and greatest camera gear, like the latest lenses, the latest bodies, this and the other. Sure. And I used to shoot a Nikon D750 until very recently, which is a great camera. It's a great body. I love that thing. I've shot it to bits, really. It's getting dangerous at some point. But I love it. I love the way it felt. It produced the images I needed to produce. And none of my clients has ever asked me what camera body I was shooting the images with. They're really not interested in that whatsoever, right? And so to me, it was like upgrading to a newer body or shifting into the mirrorless system, for instance. It was simply a numbers game. Does it make sense? Does it either make sense for me financially to do that? Because it's another tool that I have to buy when I don't necessarily have a need to upgrade the tool that I'm working, because the tool that I'm using with, that I'm working with, that I'm using, does all the things that I needed to do. So there's no reason. Or does it give me any advantages? Like, for instance, is there some kind of buyback? Like, do I get more time back, or are the files easier to, I don't know, whatever. Right. And I until recently didn't see a reason to upgrade at all until, of course, it got to the point where the risk factor involved in carrying on with that body the risk was just too high.
Right.
Yeah.
The shutter could explode at any second with that many actuations on it.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really getting to the point where, it started to sound a little bit different. When the shutter sound starts to shift and you go, that's not how I remember it. Of course, the last thing you can afford is, your equipment to fail.
Right.
On a shoot in front of a client. So it's like, okay, well, right, we're gonna have to change that. And then there's a legitimate reason for me to upgrade. But other than that, purely from a business owner's point of view, not from a photography nerd, like I love everything to do with photography gear type of point of view, right? But purely from a business point of view, it really has to make sense. I mean, it even goes to the point where, I'm thinking, like, I could buy, I could buy a more expensive constant light to light myself right now. But actually, I already have an LED panel, and I love umbrellas. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
And so there's really no tangible reason for me to go and spend, nearly $1,000 on an aperture light and another $400 or something on a light dome. So there's no reason for it.
Yep.
And that's as you say, that's the difference between running a business and doing it for your own personal enjoyment.
Yeah.
Both of these things are great,
exactly.
But the motivations are different.
Yeah. And if you run the business efficiently and you're making profit and it affords you time to play on your own also, then the money that the business pays you, because those are separate from the business's profit, you can go spend on all of the gear that you want to spend it on and geek out on all the technology, and that's totally cool. They're just entirely different scenarios.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's often, I think that's difficult to grasp for people, especially when they first start out. It's just that holding back on that urge to spend all your money, like your last penny on, on even more gear.
And as you said, it's a tool for a job. And can other tools get the job done? Also, can you get one used that will get the job done the same, save some money there? Or if you're not even sure if you need something, rent it and do a couple shoots with some rental gear. Spend, $30 pounds a day, whatever, to test drive something for a weekend. And then you might find that, like, I don't actually need this. Or I loved these shots that I took, but I shot 4 clients this week. They didn't buy any of those shots I got with the new macro lens. Maybe I don't need to spend $2,000 on a macro lens because my clients don't care.
Exactly. I'll give you a really good example for that very example. So when I first started shooting headshots, I used a 70-200 for the vast majority of all the shots. And then, that Nikon 70-200 2.8, costs a pretty penny. I then eventually moved on to shooting with an 85 1.8, which is a considerably more inexpensive lens. And what I find is that I can say 90% of the shots that the clients pick at the end would have been shot with the 85. So had I known that from the outset, I would have never dropped all that cash on that 70-200. I mean, that being said, it's a beautiful lens and I use it for lots of other things as well, for sure.
Yep.
But purely for headshots, for me, the way that I shoot, the 85mm is just my go-to lens. However, again, there's a caveat, because what I do now is, especially with people who are the first-time clients, I will start out with the 70-200 because it means I'm a little bit further away from the client, and as we get acquainted with each other, 20 minutes, half an hour in, I'll switch over to the 85, and then it's not as weird when I'm literally in their face.
Right. Yeah. So, I love the 85 for headshots too. That is my go-to headshot lens. And for boudoir photographers, I recommend that 70-200 for detail shots. especially like as a dude, I'm not going to get up in my client's business to photograph the details on their outfit. You know, I mean, if they've got beautiful lace work falling across their collarbone, I'm going to shoot that every day of the week, but I'm not going to get my camera up 6 inches away from their chest to take the picture. Because one, like, I don't want to get that close to my clients. It just as a comfort thing for them. But also, like, they're not going to move the same when I'm up in their bubble. So what I'll do is I put people into a pose knowing that the only thing showing is going to be like their neck and their collarbone, but I will pose every part of their body and have them look away and do the thing like they've believed their whole body is being photographed, and I'm just zoomed in on the detail shots I want to get. And then they'll see the photos later on and forget that they even did the pose and just love the shots. But that's another boudoir tip. What's that, number 4, 5? I lost count. Get the longer lens for the detail shots so you're not in your client's personal bubble.
Perfect. Let's talk a little bit about equipment. I think there's 2 things we need to really cover. One is gear, just generally, what do you need if you want to get into boudoir photography? But also then the other thing is location. Like, where do you shoot that? I think that's sort of that's going to be big on somebody's mind.
I think they go hand in hand because location could dictate the gear that you need. So for the first 4-5 years, I shot in hotels, and I have 2 local ones near me that I would book out. One was like a neutral gray decor. The other one was red and black. And so I went and I toured every hotel in my area to find ones that didn't look like they were decorated in the 70s. And like even the modern hotels, like, why do you have orange and brown walls? That's ugly. It's like they don't want you to be in the room, so they make them hideous, So ones that were affordable, that made sense, because I'm renting them every single time we shoot, and ones that had decor that was going to fit anyone's color choices or style or anything.
Actually, I just interrupt you there. A few years ago, my wife and I went over to Lake Tahoe, and we rented out a hotel room in Tahoe City, it was amazing. Basically, the room was like straight out of the 70s. It was beautiful. I mean, it had like a sort of a built-in like kitchenette type of a thing. Yeah. But everything, like the dishwasher and everything, was straight out of the 70s. But it was like it was brand new in the 70s.
Right.
So you walked in and you were like, whoa, okay, what's that decor? And then you go, wait a minute, all the appliances they actually look brand new, like they've been bought in the 70s, mothballed, and never used.
Yeah.
And we're like, this is pretty damn cool. I mean, where are my flared jeans? Like, what's going on?
Right.
Awesome. So
let's put a record on and we'll hang out. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. It was great. Yeah. It's phenomenal. So right. I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to decor, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the hotel game or Airbnbs are great for people getting started in boudoir. You don't need to go rent an expensive studio. It's like having the expensive camera body. Your client doesn't care how much you spend to get the thing done, as long as it is a comfortable, clean, safe environment where they have a bathroom, place to go change that is away from you. They can take their shoes off without feeling gross. They don't have to walk through your living room and step on kids' toys and see dirty dishes in the sink. Like it's a clean, safe environment that looks like it's used for that. I would never just go, tell my client, hey, meet me up in room 201. My stylist and I would be outside the hotel entrance to greet them, to get their bag, to walk them in. And it was cool because I wasn't paying a monthly rent. If I had a slow month, I would just book the room on days that I booked clients. So that was cost control also in the beginning. And it was great. We got really good shooting in these spaces. I could work the room really well, from the bed to the couch to the walls to the floor to whatever. Like, we made a lot happen in those rooms. And then I had an office where I would do my in-person reveals that I now use as my shoot space. I remodeled the place to use it for both. So that's an option. Again, Airbnbs are great too. Rent them as you need them. You can change your styles, whatever, or rent a studio if you want to do that. But get a proof of concept. Make sure you know how to make money first before you go and sign a lease on a place, because you don't need that kind of financial stress in your life. As far as the equipment goes, a lot of it comes down to the lighting. There's a photographer I was hanging out with the other day. She has a studio she calls the Sunlight Space. Tons of windows that face south and west. And for us, that's daylight all day. And she has sheer white curtains. The place is so evenly lit inside. At any direction you face is great lighting. Given it's all bright and airy, she does branding, like personal branding photos in there for people, because any of the setups she has, doesn't matter any time of day, the lighting looks fantastic for what she does. So she doesn't need lights, but I bring my strobes, I shoot my style. I can do them in the middle of the day in an open parking lot and get the same dark and moody look that I shoot. So, I use a single gridded softbox. Sometimes I'll throw a background light or a hair light on somebody if we're shooting a dark against a dark, but I mean, black hair against a black background will disappear. So I'll throw a hair light on. Obviously I don't have that problem, but, back to the camera talk, everything is a tool for a job. So what tools do you need to create the look? And that will depend on your environment usually.
It's, what's changed my mind a little bit about lighting is, I had, a week or so ago, I spoke to Sean Luthwaite, who's a headshot and portrait photographer over in Stockholm.
Yep.
This Scottish expat over in Stockholm. And he exclusively shoots with one light. And when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about the stuff that he does, I kind of thought, sometimes it's good to simplify your process. And I've found that maybe over the last few years, my thinking has gotten too overcomplicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm now really into just reeling it back a little bit and actually just using one light and just exploring that. Whilst, previously I used to throw like the more the merrier on something. It's like, but yeah, that's really, it's changed my way of thinking. In the same way that I compare this with street photography, because I like to do street photography just to relax and just to kind of get away from everything else that I do, because it's so different and it has there's no commercial afterthought or anything like that. It's just pure enjoyment and I just like doing it. But I don't take several bodies or lenses or anything with me. I just have one tiny little camera, like a Fuji F-series camera, that I take with me, and that is it. So it's a fixed lens, there's no zoom, there's nothing. It just simplifies the whole process down to that's the only tool I've got. So now I've got to start thinking on my feet rather than relying on a zoom lens and this and that and the other. So so from a lighting perspective, that's an interesting way of thinking.
And I didn't have any money when I got started. I had one softbox. No, I had two softboxes, but I only had one speed ring. And this was before Godox and Flashpoint and all these affordable lighting solutions that are out now. I couldn't afford Profoto. I wanted the $10,000 Broncolor set that I had no business using. And I couldn't afford anything else, so I used one light and I got really, really good with it. And I shot everything with a 50 millimeter on a full frame camera on my, one fixed lens, same. I got really, really good at it. And now that I have all these other tools, like I still use the same stuff, really. I mean, I shoot with the 35 millimeter lens now because I'm in a little bit smaller space, but I don't know, I'm still doing 95% of my shoot with one lens. And I do the same two lighting setups. It's either a hair light or a background light and the same gridded softbox.
It's funny you mentioned Broncolor. I remember I shared a studio session one time, again, years ago, with another photographer. And the studio basically had a full Broncolor setup, which was beautiful until that other photographer set up a beauty dish which came off the light and smashed onto the floor and was broken. And that cost him $800 to replace. And at that point I'm thinking like, right, okay, that idea of either shooting Broncolor gear or even Profoto gear was like, okay, I'm going to drop that idea because that's just idiotic.
Yeah. And I wanted something a little bit better than the Paul C. Buff, the Alien Bees, or the White Lightnings. Like, there were inconsistencies. I don't know. They're great for what they are. I'm grateful we have Flashpoint and Godox stuff now. That's what I use, the 8600s. But I don't know. It's a reliable flash and it's battery operated and it works. I don't really care about anything else.
Yeah. Godox and
my clients don't care.
Exactly. I mean, Godox and Westcott are actually two like really awesome brands. They're really great bang for the buck. I currently shoot Interfit. And the reason why I shoot them actually is because they are the same form factor as the old Alien Bees. So they're cuboid. And my shooting space is really small. So my camera room is just tiny. And so I needed to get strobes that wouldn't be elongated. So I can get them closer to the wall, if you know what I mean.
Uh-huh.
So, and they're yellow, that's the other thing. Who doesn't love a yellow strobe? I mean, but so they work really well for me. Yeah. The only trouble that I have with them now is that there isn't much of an ecosystem around them.
Right.
And so that's why I'm thinking of it might be time to look at other options. Simply because Interfit, I think as a brand, they're really good. They're super reliable. They're virtually indestructible.
Yep.
And they look really cool. And I've got nothing but good things to say about them. But there's a lack of an ecosystem. To the point where, for instance, they're still very much tied into this. Oh, you have to have a manufacturer specific, like camera brand specific transmitter, for example.
Right.
Which when everybody else can do sort of multi-brand type transmitters, you kind of go, well, that's not like, because when I'm teaching a class, like I'm teaching a lighting class at the moment, and it's like, well, this is nonsense because I've got 5 people in the room, or 6 people in the room, all with different cameras. One's got an Olympus, another one's got Canon, there's Nikon, whatever. That's like, what you really want to do is you just want to give them the transmitter, plonk it on their camera, and then start shooting.
Yeah.
It's a major downside that I can't do that. So it's just things like that. Again, it's gotten to the point where I need a piece of equipment that does the job that I needed to do, and that's where I've hit the limits with this particular piece of equipment. And that's when it's worth thinking about other things. So, but I've been looking at Godox and Westcott. So I think those are 2 things I've been looking at.
Yeah, I remember the old days of using Pocket Wizard triggers, and those were great because they just plugged into the hot shoe and it could work on any camera. Could go trigger your flashes, as long as there was almost line of sight or, something close to that. But having the Godox stuff now, I'll teach a lighting class. I'll have 4 different setups. So I have more lights now because when I teach classes, I need more than one setup. But I really only use the stuff when I'm teaching lighting classes. Otherwise, all the gear I have just sits over there and, collects dust. So yeah, they're great because you can just pop the thing off. If you're not worried about high-speed sync, then any trigger can go on any brand of camera and fire these strobes. Use SnapBridge.
Yeah, it works really well.
Yep. I do it too when I'm filming myself or doing my own headshots.
Yeah.
So that's the one downside I don't like about these Nikon mirrorless is they don't have an easy trigger, a remote trigger like the Canon ones do. Because I used to use the 5D series. And my Mark IV, I had a remote trigger that could do instant or a 2-second timer. And I did all my own headshots, all my own branding photos with that. And it was tiny, so I could hide it in my hand and you'd never know it was in the photo. But I mean, yeah, it's cool to see everything in SnapBridge and do it on your phone, but I had to hit the thing and then throw it down and then do the pose. And it's just not as convenient.
Exactly. That's exactly what I used to do. In fact, that's how I came up with the whole concept for the 3 Heads in a Row project, was because I was actually trying to do an image for the About page on my website. And hang on, the dog's broken in again. He does that.
I just see the tail going back and forth.
Yeah.
Great.
But yeah, so I was trying to come up with a look for the profile image on my website, and
Yeah.
And as I was doing that, of course, I had to remote control everything. He's just broken in through the other door. Okay, now you're stuck, buddy. That's it. My wife just shut the door, so he's stuck in here. Yeah, you're with me now. Anyway, so and so everything had to be remotely triggered, and it was a similar thing. I would set it to like a 2-second timer, or like a 2-second delay. I would hit the button. I would throw the remote away. I would pause and take the shot, and then I'd go through the same process. And it was just when I hit the button, somehow I miscalculated, and I was sort of mid pose. I was basically changing from one pose to the next. Yeah. And the thing fired, and it took the image. And I looked at it afterwards, and I'm like, well, obviously that doesn't work. I look like a deer in the headlights. I had that kind of country bumpkin look of somebody who doesn't recognize their own recognition in their own image in the water, sort of thing. But I was looking at it, I'm thinking, I mean, clearly that doesn't work as a serious headshot. But there's something buffoonishly funny about it that I really like, And so as I was looking at the other shots, that was a shot I used to come back to, and I used to think like, there's something funny about this, something cool about this somehow. Yep. And then, then the next thing is like, oh, okay. So what if I can shoot other people like that? And then it's like, okay, so how do I get people to give me these grotesque expressions? And you come up with this whole, I came up with this whole thing of using objects, to get them to warm up to me. So, the whole thing is basically I get them to choose 3 different objects that mean a lot to them, and by doing that serves 2 purposes. One, it's a triptych, essentially a series of 3 shots where the subject interacts with that particular object that they've chosen, or those 3 objects, and so that sort of tells a story across 3 shots. So you kind of get to know what that person is into simply by the objects that I've chosen and the way they interact with them, because it could be descriptive of their profession or what they're into or whatever, or what means a lot to them. But also it's a great conversation starter and a great talking point. So what it does is it actually warms them up to me, because we can immediately talk about the object and why they've chosen that and what the story is and all that kind of stuff. And so it helps them to relax really quickly. Yep. And that means that, I can build up that trust, and then over time they'll, within minutes, we get to the point where I can really push them over the line, and they give me these stupidly idiotic expressions, and they feel good about it.
Right?
And that's the thing.
Same thing I do with my clients based on the outfits they bring and the props and whatever else. Yeah. I get them talking about these stories, and they open up, and it's not me interviewing them. It's not an interrogation. They're not put on the spot for anything. We're just having a conversation about something that they're passionate about and just hanging out.
And also the outfits. I mean, this is the other thing I was going to talk to you about is the outfits. I mean, I take it the clients choose the outfits, or they bring them with them. Yeah. And of course, that's a very personal thing for the vast majority of people, I guess. So that in itself is quite a revealing sort of aspect to it.
Yeah. And that's part of our consult process, is talking about wardrobe and giving them suggestions. Part of my preparation guide, I have a lot of info in there about how to pick out outfits, what works well, what doesn't. But I tell people there's no dress code. Like, you wear whatever you want. I have clients who are fully clothed their whole shoot, and that's great. I have some who want to be naked the entire time. I'm like, great. That's it. It's just whatever you're comfortable with is what we're going to do. But we're telling your story. We're going to do 5 outfits. So if you want to bring lingerie, cool. But also bring your favorite dress to wear on date nights, or an interview outfit, or, your brunch outfit. Or, we have clients. I've had someone bring a wetsuit and fins because she travels the world scuba diving. I've photographed people in mermaid tails, hiking gear. What else have we done? Someone brought her Renaissance Fair outfit. And I mean, totally garbed out, fan, corset, everything, looked incredible. We had belly dancer clothes, and just, whatever they're passionate about, whatever is part of their identity and their personality. we have them bring that. And so it's fun for me because I get new things to play with all the time in front of my camera, as far as the outfits and personalities go. But it also makes them feel more validated because these things that are important to them are worthy. They're not trivial.
Of course. Yeah, because if they would have chosen them for something that's extremely personal, I guess,
Yeah.
I mean, it's always like, taking your clothes off in front of another person is an extremely intensely personal thing to do.
Yeah.
And that being photographed and that being recorded itself,
Right.
in itself is extremely personal.
Yeah. And the way that I position that process to my clients, I say, you're not taking your clothes off to be sexy. You're dropping your armor and you're being vulnerable and you're going to face who you are because that person's already good enough and I want you to see her. And that is an entirely different scenario than cool, take your clothes off so we can take sexy photos.
Absolutely.
Same end result,
Yeah.
more or less, but entirely different way to get there.
But psychologically, a major confidence booster.
Huge. And it's why there's no dress code. Like, again, they can wear whatever they want. They can be fully clothed the whole time. It's totally cool. And I've had so many clients come in and be like, cool, well, I brought all these outfits. I don't feel comfortable doing anything in my underwear. I'm like, great. And we get 15 minutes in and they're like, can we just go naked? Is that cool now? And, like everything changes once they get the vibe of the room and they see how they look in the photos and it changes the way they feel. It's a pretty cool thing.
It's a great thing to see that happen. I always enjoy that. It's probably one of my favorite moments when people come back and they review the images and all of a sudden they, there's this sort of this mind shift that happens often in people when they think they've only ever seen themselves on like bad selfies or passport photos. And they never realize that actually when they're posed properly, when they're lit properly, they'll look amazing. They've never seen themselves in that light, quite literally. And it's when that realization takes place, when that light bulb goes off and you see that happening, that's one of my favorite moments.
Right?
In any session is great.
Yeah. Because then it's not even about the photos.
It's not, no.
It's just that transformation has happened. You've done your job. You've made your money already. And now it's just, details after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what would be your number one tip for anyone wanting to start out in or get into boudoir photography? What would be like your number one piece of advice?
Figure out your why. Why do you want to do it? Because that is going to give you direction on how to approach everything. What kind of lighting you want to do, what kind of posing you want to do, what kind of clients do you want to attract? What are we actually doing for people? So figuring out why is the first step. And there's no wrong answer, but you need to know that so everything else can fall into place.
Awesome. Mike, on that note, it was absolutely amazing having you on the show. What a conversation. There's so much absolute gold in there for anybody who's has ever thought about potentially giving boudoir photography a shot. And likewise also, I think anybody who's ever thought about being photographed in that way, there's a lot in there. So thank you very much for being our guest this week. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thanks for having me, Kirsten. This was great. This was a quick 2 hours. I feel like we could sit here for like 10 more and not even realize a day went by.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody says that. It's I mean, that's what I mean. That's why I never put any limits on the length of any episode. And there might be listeners out there thinking like, oh wow, an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's a very long episode. But that's just how long it takes to really deep dive into those kind of subjects and getting to know the person behind the lens, which is ultimately exactly what we're trying to do.
I do the same on my YouTube channel. My interviews are intended to be a half hour. They all turn into multiple part episodes. So I feel you.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you very much. This episode has been rudely interrupted by this dog. It's a complete nightmare.
I see that as a value add. Everyone loves happy dogs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's part of the show. For all of you listening to the audio version of this podcast, be advised that there's a fully technicolored version over on YouTube. All you got to do is head over to YouTube. Once you're there, just hit that like and subscribe button. As always, it does help us being found. If you are listening to the Apple Podcast version of this, just leave us a little 5-star rating, leave a little comment, because again, it just helps us being found in the great wide big old sea of podcasts out there. Anyway, that being said, it's been a blast. See you again next week.